Good afternoon, everyone. So this is our second lesson for core. It's called A Taxing Time, the Boston Tea Party. And I'm super excited to read it to you. So for a long time, almost everyone who lived in America was proud to be a British citizen ruled by the King of Great Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British government, or Parliament, had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies. To help pay for these expenses, Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Taxes are extra money people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today, we may pay taxes when we buy clothes at a department store, food in a restaurant, or gasoline in our car. Depending on what state or where you live, you might have to pay $1 or two or more for a new shirt than what's listed on the price tag, or a few extra cents for a sandwich than the price listed on the menu. But these stores do not keep this extra money. They must give the extra money, or taxes, to the government. These days, we vote and elect representatives, or people to represent us in government. These people make decisions about how best to spend the taxes to provide public services that benefit all who live here. So 2 of Colorado's representatives are Michael Bennett and Cory Gardner. These people, the government uses the taxes to help pay for things that everybody needs, like schools, public transportations, roads up here, water and garbage services, police and fire protection, and other public services. Many people agree that it is a good use of their public money, and they don't mind paying taxes for a good cause. So this image here is of a British Parliament room. But back in the time when the colonists were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in the British Parliament. So that means that they were forced to pay taxes without representation or having a say-so in what they paid. So many people who lived in the American colonies in the 1700s felt that it was unfair for the British king to ask them to pay taxes. Colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugar, and other things. So stamps are similar to what we know as stamps, where you put them on your envelopes to send out mail. But in that time, they put them on all sorts of different things. So, for example, if we had that today, I'd have to put a stamp on my phone to show that I paid the government for my phone. Because of this, the colonists could not voice their opinions to the British government through representatives. Why, they wondered, should they have to pay taxes? It didn't seem fair to them. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry, but it was in the colony of Massachusetts, which was up top here, if we remember. It was at the very top of the country, that tempers flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try and keep the peace in Boston, but it did not help very much. Then, in 1773, the British Parliament did something that the colonists could not stand. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company only, charging a large tax for the tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay taxes on tea, one of their favorite drinks. They began sending shiploads of tea back to Britain, ordering tea from Holland instead. This made the king even angrier. He told them that they could not send any more tea back to Great Britain without paying the tax. Because of this, the British colonists of Massachusetts revolted, or rose up, against the British king. They decided that they would not accept the king's decision. So why do you think they bought tea from Holland instead of from Great Britain? So, shiploads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston. So a port is where ships can come in and drop things off and then leave. On a December night in 1773, a group of Boston men known as the Sons of Liberty planned a most unusual tea party. Smearing their faces with soot, grease and streaks of red paint. They stuck feathers in their hair, disguised as Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time. They made their way down to the harbor. A harbor is where the ocean and the land meet. Climbing aboard 3 British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost tea and money. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. So tea back then wasn't like what we have today. What we have today are little bags of tea. Back then, they were these large, thin bricks of tea, and they were supposed to last 10 years. Tea today only lasts like a year or 2 in the bags. So this was a lot of money and a lot of tea that they were dumping. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important harbors. He told them that they would not receive any more goods. Goods are like supplies, stuff they need, like food, from Great Britain until they paid the tea that they had destroyed. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so many people had to close their shops. This one here was owned by a man named Paul Revere, who we're going to learn about next time. Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? The people of Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king, but other colonists warned them not to act so quickly. Wait a bit, they suggested. It is never a good idea to fight back without cooling off for a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a great meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about midway between the farthest New England colonies and the southern colonies. So the farthest New England colony, way up at the top, is Massachusetts, and the one way at the bottom was Georgia. So right in the middle, if there was a map here, would be Philadelphia. Each colony elected representatives to attend the meeting. It was the first time that representatives from the colonies met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some remained loyal or faithful to Great Britain and the king. They were called loyalists. After all, they said, we're British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called patriots. Members of the Continental Congress included George Washington from Virginia, a young army commander who had helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin was there too, a Philadelphian known for his ability to get people to work together. Though unable to attend, Thomas Jefferson, known as an excellent writer, was elected as a representative from Virginia. At that first Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a letter telling him that they wanted to work things out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws and rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws since we're not able to vote for the laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they waited for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and to stop buying goods from Great Britain. So where else would they get their goods? They'd have to make everything like the Native Americans for themselves, right? So, at the end of the meeting, the colonists were still split in their opinions about what to do. The loyalists hoped that the king would grant them their request, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The patriots kept things stirred up, talking of going to war and breaking away from Britain altogether. It certainly was not a calm time. So, I now want you to think back to what we were talking about in all of this. And I want you to think, what are taxes and what are they used for? Do you remember what a representative is? And if you were in this time, do you think you would be a loyalist Or do you think you would be a patriot? All right, everybody, look on the YouTube page for the craft for today. Is super fun. I'm so excited.